just because they don't agree with what you're doing, that doesn't mean that they get to make the rules, right? When you're young, your parents make the rules. While you're living in your house, they make the rules. And I totally believe that you should respect your parents, even once you get older. I think that respect for your parents is a big deal. But there's a difference between respecting their opinion and respecting their decisions and letting them rule your life. I don't let my parents rule my life. The problem is that you don't believe, and you have to change that. You have to learn how to believe in yourself more in order to commit to your dreams and actually follow through on them.
I believe the biggest problem in the world is that people don't understand themselves enough. This show is designed to help you understand your INFJ personality, heal from your past, and create a life that you love. I'm Sarah Kuhn, and this is the Quiet Ones podcast.
So today we're going to talk about the kind of career that INFJs really thrive in. Most INFJs end up in careers that we really hate, and we end up in them because it's safe. They feel like the right thing to do. They feel like the best thing to do at the time. But a lot of us have a really, really difficult time picking a career. And so we gravitate towards what's safe or what our parents want us to do or what, we think will make a lot of money. And I mean, I had this problem when I was in high school and when I was in college. And I talked to a lot of people who have the same problem. And I really, really want to help you with this problem because it took me a long time to figure out what I'm supposed to do. And I really, really, really don't want you to end up in a career that you hate. I really feel like life should not be torture. Sometimes it feels like it is torture, right? It feels like we make a lot of decisions that make our life a lot harder. And I talked a lot about this in the previous episode, but we really kind of do it to ourselves. We torture ourselves through the decisions that we make. And, life is incredibly difficult. It really is. But we can make it better. We can handle the hard things and we can do the things that we want to do. We can do the things that make us happy. If you're like me, you have hated your job for a long time. And honestly, I really feel like it's because for me, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I did the thing that was in front of me, the thing that seemed like the right thing at the time. And while there are parts of my job that I enjoy and parts of things that I've done in the past that I enjoy, there's something different that I feel called to do. I feel inspired to do. I feel like I should be doing. And I'm not really quite sure how to bridge that gap. And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. It's really difficult to pick a career. Let's just start with that. It's incredibly difficult. There's so many things that you have to deal with, right? Your parents telling you what you should do. And if you're like me, my mom was telling me one thing and my dad was telling me another thing, and I was feeling something completely different. So I was really confused, and I wanted to please both of my parents, which when they both want different things, there was no way that I could have pleased both of them. But that was what I wanted, and so that weighed on my mind a lot. I wanted a job that paid well. Both of my parents told me that I had to go to college, and I believed that going to college was the right thing, but my family didn't have any money. And so in order for me to go to college, I had to get student loans. And so now I have $70,000 worth of student loans. So I knew that I was going to end up with $50,000 to $100,000 worth of student loans. So when I was picking my career, I kept in mind that I wanted a job that paid well. I wanted a job where I would be able to pay back the student loans. That was one of the first things that I thought about. Something else that I thought about was I wanted a job that I believed that I could do. I wanted a job that I felt like I was capable of doing, that would fit with me. And saying that, it was kind of a weird thing at the time because I've always had like this weird belief about myself. Like on the one hand, I believe I can do anything that I set my mind to. right? That everything is possible. At one time, I thought about being a literal rocket scientist, right? Like an aerospace engineer. And I actually studied mechanical engineering for a while. And while I was studying that, I was thinking about looking at quantum mechanics. Um, so there, on the one hand, I believe I can do anything. But then on the other hand, I have like very low self-confidence and very low self-love. So it's like this constant battle in my head of I can do anything I want to do, but ooh, I don't know if I can do that. So I mean, that's a big deal with a lot of people that I talk to and coach about picking a career is what do you believe that you can do? And then the next thing is what do you think that you want? Right? Especially when you're forced to make this decision is when you're like 18 years old. Right? You're so young. I was trying to remember how I felt like when I was 18. And I think there was a part of me that knew that I was young, but I didn't really believe it. I believed that I could do anything that I wanted to do and that I had all of the answers. And it really didn't hit me until just a few years ago that I really don't know everything. And there's a lot that I'm unsure of. And I think a lot of that comes with age, that when you're young, you think you know everything, and the older you get, the less you know. The more you know, but like the less that you know too, really. But when you're young and you're trying to pick a career or even trying to pick a major in college, it's presented to you as this life goal, right? We think about it in this way of what am I going to do for the rest of my life? People ask you this question when you're young. What do you want to be when you grow up? And it's a perfectly normal question, and it's a perfectly, it seems like a benign question, and that people probably really just don't know what to say to you when you're young. And so they say things like this that really aren't that big of a deal, but they come out as a bigger deal later, and they affect some people differently. I remember when my brother was born, people used to ask me, I was 9 years old when my brother was born. And so they would ask me, like, what do you think of your brother? And I always thought that was such a stupid question. Like, I don't know. What am I supposed to think? It's a kid. What do I think? I don't know. And I was shy to begin with. And so, I mean, I just thought it was stupid. Like, what am I supposed to think? I don't know what I think. Like, ask me a different question because that one doesn't make any sense to me. Right. And I kind of had the same idea about this whole what do you want to be when you grow up thing. Like I said, I think people have the best of intentions and it's kind of a benign question, but when you're already struggling with what you want to do with your life and somebody's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you're like, I don't know. I don't know what I want to be. What am I supposed to want to be? Like, what's the answer to that question? I don't know. And it's like this massive existential crisis. And you end up like crying on the floor in the corner because you're like, I really don't know. Just stop asking me that question. Okay, just like stop. I don't have an answer. I don't know. And I think a large part of it is because it's presented to you as your life's goal, and so you don't really have any room to change, right? You're expected to commit to something. If you go to school to be a doctor, then you're expected to be a doctor for the rest of your life. If you go to school to be a lawyer, you're expected to be a lawyer for the rest of your life. If you go to school to major in business, you're supposed to start a business or be a business manager, for the rest of your life. And if you get halfway through your life and you decide, you know what, I don't really want to be a doctor, I want to be a politician, then people are kind of like, oh, really? Why didn't you just be a politician to begin with? You know, I've had people say that to me. Like, I went to school, I majored in criminal justice, and now I work in marketing. And every time I go to apply for a job and I have to sit through an interview, people are like, oh, you have a degree in criminal justice? Why? And I'm like, well, college was difficult, and I guess I really just, I don't know. I thought that was what I wanted to do, and now it's not. And I have 10 years of experience working in marketing. Can we talk about that? Nobody really leaves any room for change. And I think a lot of us feel really embarrassed when we decide to change. I spent years in college studying engineering. I even finished my criminal justice degree and went back to school because I wanted to be an engineer. And then 3/4 of the way through my engineering degree, I was like, ooh, hold please. I don't really want to be an engineer. And then everybody looked at me and they're like, what? Why? And then after that, after I quit school, people kept asking me, are you going to go back and finish your engineering degree? And there was a part of me that said yes, right? I wanted to say yes because they all thought that I should be an engineer. And so I'm like, yeah, I've been thinking about it. And I did think about it, but I thought about it with dread because I did not want to finish it. I didn't like it. I didn't want to be around those people. I didn't want to be in that school. I didn't want to feel that kind of pressure anymore. I wanted to do something different. I hated myself for thinking that I wanted to be an engineer, for telling people that that was what I was going to do. And then I hated them for questioning me about it. There was no room for me to change. And the thing is, especially as INFJs, we get really caught up in what other people think. We want other people to be happy. That's natural for us. It happens to us all the time. We think about that constantly because it's a part of our personality. We want to please the people that mean the most to us, especially our parents. Especially our parents. I never did anything that my parents didn't want me to do when I was young. Everything they told me to do, I was going to do it. And that was like up until I decided to be decided that I didn't want to be an engineer. It was funny because when I first picked engineering, my mom was like, you're not going to do that. You don't want to do that. That's going to be really difficult and you're not going to like it. And I was like, no, I'm definitely going to do it. And then somewhere along the way, in the 10 years that I was in college, she adopted the idea that I was going to be an engineer. And when I wanted to quit, she was like, are you really sure that's what you want to do? I thought you were going to do this. And I'm like, I thought you didn't want me to be an engineer. And she was like, no, you can do whatever. I'm just saying, I thought that, you really wanted it. And I'm like, I don't really know what I want, honestly. That was probably the most honest thing that I had said at that time. Here's the thing though, something that's really, really important to remember. Just because they don't agree with what you're doing, that doesn't mean that they get to make the rules, right? When you're young, your parents make the rules. While you're living in your house, they make the rules. And I totally believe that you should respect your parents, even once you get older. I think that respect for your parents is a big deal. But there's a difference between respecting their opinion and respecting their decisions and letting them rule your life. I don't let my parents rule my life. I know that at some point, I don't like to think about it, but I know that at some point they're going to pass away because that's part of life. And I don't want it to happen. I get scared every time something happens to my parents. They both had COVID last year, and I was really scared of that. But they made it through. But I have to think about the time that they're not going to be here. And I'm going to have to live with the decisions that I made. So I don't believe that they should be able to rule my life, especially now that I'm like 36. I'm getting close to middle age here. I was thinking that most of my grandparents died in their mid 70s. And I'm like, well, if that's the case, then I'm a few years from middle age, right? So why would I let my parents make the rules? It's your life. You make the rules. You have to make the rules. You have to make the decisions for you. And like I said, you still can respect your parents. You still respect their desires and their beliefs. But at the end of the day, it's your life and your decision, and you make the rules. There's a stat that I heard a couple of years ago, and I've repeated it multiple times because it's just shocking to me. Millennials will have 9 different careers in their lifetime. 9 different careers, not jobs, but careers. I actually made a list of all the careers that I've had. All the different I went with job types because some of them I don't really think were quote unquote careers, but they would probably be categorized that way. So when I was in college, I guess, well, I really started in high school, but I spent about 10 years working in retail in different jobs, some of them part time, some of them full time. Um, I spent 4 years working at Walmart, and I ended up being like a department manager. So that was like my first career type. I worked for a nonprofit for probably 4 years. And then after that, I worked as a PR manager for a professional athlete. After that, I worked as a marketing manager, which is what my day job is now. Um, and then concurrently, I guess at the same time, what I really want to do is to be a writer. That's why I have my blog. That's why I write books. And I don't know if this is different, but the other thing that I came up with was podcaster. I feel like it's different because you have different intentions and you do different things, even though, I mean, the main goal of writing and podcasting is the same thing. There are different skills. So I separated it out. But in all of those things, that's 6 different careers already that I've had. I mean, I'm well on my way to 9. As I said earlier, I think I'm only about halfway through my life. So, I mean, I could easily have 12 in the next 35, 36 years. When you're thinking about your career, especially when you're deciding what you want to do, you need to forget about all the traditional things that we usually get stuck thinking about. I tried to think about all the things that I was thinking about when I was trying to make this decision. Money is always the thing that comes up. Even if you're in high school, like I said, one of the first things I thought about is how much money college costs and how much is like that's buying a house. I mean, you can't buy a house in Massachusetts for $70,000, unfortunately. You can't even buy a piece of property for $70,000. But when I was in high school, I lived in Kansas and you could buy a house for $70,000. You probably still can buy a house for $70,000 in Kansas. It's probably like a fixer-upper, but it can be done, right? It's possible. So you think about, I got stuck in that mindset of, okay, I'm going to have $100,000 in student loans. I need to be in a career that makes enough money to pay that back. And so the first thing I did was get online and Google like what kind of careers make like how much money do you need? Make $100,000 a year, I guess. Like what kind of careers make that? And back then that was a lot more money than what $100,000 is now, right? But I got stuck in that thinking, and so I weeded out of the possibilities everything that I thought wouldn't make that much money. But when you get stuck in that mindset, you leave out some of the things that could be the thing. And it's also important to remember that you don't know everything that there is to know. That's really important, and that's difficult to think about. I was reading about this in a book, and let me see if I can explain it to you properly. When we're young, we think that we know everything that there is to know, right? And even as we're older, like I was speaking about before, we start to realize that we don't know everything that there is to know. And so a lot of times we make decisions based on what we know right now. And when you're making the decision, you might admit, I don't really know everything that I think that there is to know, but I'm making the best decision that I can with the information that I have. I've said that multiple times. But what I've never realized is that I don't know everything there is to know. And that in the future, I will know more, right? If I keep reading, if I keep listening to podcasts, if I keep learning, if I keep expanding what I know, I will know more in the future. right? So we make decisions based on the best available knowledge at the time, but we leave out that part of maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'll learn something different in the future. And how this applies to picking a career and being focused on money. I thought about writing when I was in high school. I thought about it when I was in college, but I immediately dismissed the idea because I didn't think that writers made a lot of money. I knew that some writers did, but I thought of the chance of me being like Gabby Bernstein or Mel Robbins, or I mean, any of your favorite writers, you pick one. Jordan Peterson is one of my favorite writers. I thought the chance of me being that successful was very slim. And that's always what I was told when I was growing up too. It was like, you're not going to be famous, you're not going to be wealthy, so just forget about that. It's not going to happen. And I knew that there were people who wrote, doing other things. I knew that part of marketing is writing. I knew that journalism is writing and all of that, but none of that seemed it didn't seem capable for me. Like I didn't believe that I could do it. And so I just totally discounted writing. And even back then, blogs weren't as popular back then, or at least I didn't know about them. Podcasts weren't even invented back then. It wasn't easy to build a website back then. There were so many opportunities that we have now that didn't exist back then. And so when I thought, okay, I'm going to decide what career I'm going to have, I never thought that there would be another option for me to make money, right? I never thought that I could start my own business and it would be relatively cheap, and that 65,000 people on Instagram would follow me, and 175,000 people would listen to my podcast. I never thought that that was an option. It wasn't an option back then, right? So we make the best decisions that we can in the moment, but it's important to remember that things might change in the future, that you might know more about the subject in the future, that everything could change, right? So when you think about money, I would encourage you not to discount what it is that you want to do. If you really want to be a writer, then you shouldn't say, well, most writers don't make money, so therefore I can't make money, so therefore I'm not going to be a writer. Right? Somebody told me that about YouTube too. I had an idea in 2017. I remember the conversation very distinctly. And I was like, I think I should start a YouTube channel. And one of my friends, she said to me, that's stupid. Don't do that. Like, you're an idiot. Don't do that. You're not going to be one of those people who makes like millions of dollars off of YouTube. So just stop. Like, don't embarrass yourself. And I was like, wow, that was like very honest and like hurtful. And she was like, well, I mean, like, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I'm just saying, like, it's stupid for you to think that you would make millions of dollars off of YouTube. She's like, everybody thinks that they're going to make millions of dollars off of YouTube and nobody does. And I'm like, well, that's not true because some people do. So it's not true that nobody does because some people do. So it is true that some people make millions of dollars off of YouTube. And it's also true that if you don't try, you won't do it. You won't get there. It's also true that if you do try and you stick with it, then you have a better chance of making it than all of the people who try and then don't keep going. Right? And she was like, well, I guess so, but I mean, I don't want you to get hurt and disappointed. And I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. And I understand that and I appreciate that. I really do. But I'm not going to give up on my hopes and dreams just because you don't want me to get hurt. Getting hurt is a part of life. That happens, especially emotionally hurt, right? We protect ourselves so much from getting emotionally hurt, from getting devastated or disappointed, but why? It's a part of life. And yeah, it sucks to deal with it, but it's there. Why would you not do the thing that you want to do just because there's a possibility that it won't work out? What if you doing that thing leads you to the thing that you want to do? What if you decide, oh my God, I'm going to make $1 million on YouTube, even though I'm like totally late to the game? I'm going to do it. And so you put all of your effort into making videos and learning how to be on camera, and maybe something else happens. Maybe you decide to start a podcast and you actually get in early on the podcasting game and you do make $1 million or more. What if somebody sees you on YouTube and you become the next Justin Bieber? I mean, that's how he got to be on YouTube. I know multiple race car drivers who got discovered because of playing video games and being on YouTube. So the thing that you want to do, maybe it could lead you to the thing that you actually want to do. Maybe the thing that you're going to do hasn't even been invented yet, but you need to start doing something so that you have momentum, so that you're learning how to do things, so that you're learning how to put yourself out there. You're learning how to be disappointed and deal with it and keep going. That's a big thing. It's a big thing to learn. All right, so I got way off track there, but let's get back to it. When you're thinking about your career, don't think about money. Seriously, don't think about money. The next thing is, don't think about tradition. If your family is like, everybody is a doctor, so you're going to be a doctor. Everybody is a lawyer, so you're going to be a lawyer. We have a family farm, so you get to be the next farmer. You don't have to be a farmer. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to be a doctor. It doesn't even matter. Like, if your family has a lot of people, I see a lot of people get stuck in this, like their parents are disappointed with their lives, and so they put all of this pressure on their kids to be like this great thing. Or maybe it's pressure because like they didn't have a lot and so they want you to have more. And so they put a lot of pressure on you to do something big. They want you to have all the things that they didn't have, right? And so they pressure you to get into a job that where you can have a nice car and a nice house and insurance and, you know, have money to go on vacation and go shopping and things like that. And while they have good intentions, you shouldn't let that type of pressure, that type of, you know, mentality to push you to do something that you don't want to do and that you don't enjoy. Because what's going to happen is that you're going to end up being miserable. And then you're going to be stuck in this position of, I don't know what I want to do with my life, when you're 30 years old or 40 years old or 50 years old or 60 years old. And then what? Another thing is gender roles. When I wanted to be an engineer, I was shocked and surprised how many people said, well, you can't be an engineer because you're a girl. And I was like, what? What part of being an engineer requires you to be a guy? Like, seriously. And so then, like, I wanted to be an engineer because I liked race cars, right? And people told me, in fact, my own sister, my older sister, bullied me for years because she's like, you can't watch race cars because only guys watch race cars. And I'm like, what? Why do I have to be a guy to watch race cars? There are girl race car drivers. There are girls who are engineers in the race car, like in the NASCAR community. There are girls around race cars all the time. Why is it not okay for me? And she was like, well, you know, it's just not a girly thing to do. And I'm like, so? I don't care. And my mom, I remember having this conversation with my mom one time too. She's like, why do you want to go to the racetrack and hang out with all those guys? And I'm like, why do you not? And she goes, what do you mean? And I'm like, the ratio of guys to girls in a NASCAR garage is at least 10 to 1, if not like 20 or 30 to 1 sometimes. Like, there's so many guys. And a lot of them are really hot. Why would you not want to go? And she's like, oh, I didn't see it that way. I'm like, see, you're just not looking at it correctly. And here's the other thing. When you sit down with a group of guys and they're all talking about race cars, you know, and you're like, no, you're wrong because, and then you start, you know, like a conversation that's a real conversation about race car drivers and tracks and all this kind of stuff, and you're actually well informed and you can hold, you know, carry the conversation, they're more interested in you. And that really wasn't my motivation for being involved in races and racing, for liking racing. but it was like a fun side effect, you know, especially because they just assume that you don't know anything. And then when you actually know more than they do, then they're kind of shocked. And it's really pretty funny. So when you think about traditional gender roles, you know, like guys can't be nurses and women aren't really doctors and all that kind of stuff, I don't think that you should let that dictate your life. I don't think that you should let people tell you, you know, you can't be an engineer because you're a girl. Like, that's a stupid reason. If you want to be an engineer, I firmly believe that you should be an engineer. If you want to be an auto mechanic or a race car driver, you know, if you want to work in construction, if you want to be a bricklayer and you're a girl, you're a woman, you should be able to do that. Who's going to stop you? Don't let the tradition of that gender role hold you back. Another thing that we get stuck on is this has to be the thing that I do for the rest of my life, right? This is my lifelong career. This is my life's work. This is everything. Don't get stuck on that. It's not everything. You know, we just talked about how you're going to have 9 different careers in your lifetime. So if you just commit to that, like, I'm going to have 9 different careers in my life, then it's like, okay, what am I doing right now? What's the career that I want to do right now? Then you don't have to worry about the rest of your life. All you have to worry about is right now. Maybe you're doing something right now that isn't a long-term type of career. Maybe you know that, and that's okay. It might lead you to the next thing that you want to do, which could end up being a lifetime career, but it doesn't have to be. Just like with your parents, you know, you don't need to do what everybody else wants you to do. There's a big problem right now in our society with peer pressure, right? It's always a problem when you're in school, especially when you're in school. It's bad. It can be bad at certain places that you work at, but it's a big problem. You get stuck in what other people think, right? What certain groups of people think. And the fact of the matter is that it's so bad right now. I even don't want to share with you what I think and what I believe. I don't even want to talk about it, and I stay away from it a lot because it's so volatile. It's like people are getting canceled over an opinion, which is so ridiculous. People have commented on my Instagram and sent me direct messages because I've been talking about this book that I've been reading by Jordan Peterson, who I love. And, you know, they say really nasty things and accuse me of all kinds of things. And I'm like, if you really think that Jordan Peterson is like a radical right wing type of person, you don't know him. If he was in the United States, he's not, he's from Canada. But if he was in the United States, he would be considered a Democrat, not like a progressive Democrat, but like a traditional Democrat. He's pretty liberal and pretty open. He's not conservative at all. But just the fact that I say that I'm reading his book, then people put labels on me. And they want to judge me and they want to quote unquote cancel me. I'm like, go ahead, do it, whatever. You know, I don't care. I don't even know what that means. But if you think that I'm relevant enough to cancel me, then go right ahead. It's not going to change what I do. It's not going to change how I think about myself. It's not going to change whether or not I'm recording podcasts and putting them out there in the world. But, you know, if it makes you feel better, go right ahead. There's such a big distinction nowadays, right? People want to label you. You're either vaccinated or you're anti-vaccine, which is so stupid. I mean, I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm not vaccinated against one thing. I have had all the other vaccines. That doesn't mean that I'm anti-vaccine. That is like a branding and marketing thing to divide people. That's it. Right? If you are not a Democrat, then you're labeled a Republican. And well, if you're in the United States, at least that's how it is. I'm not a Democrat, but I'm also not a Republican. So what does that make me? I mean, there is a traditional third category that's called independent. But people seem to forget about that. Nowadays, it's just so easy to say, listen, if you don't like Chinese food, then you are anti-Chinese. And it's like, what? Just because I don't like Chinese food doesn't mean that I'm anti everything that comes from China. I'm obviously not. I mean, if you look at my house, I love Amazon, and most of the stuff that comes from Amazon comes from China. Like, that's just how it goes. But it's just like this whole mentality of like, listen, if you don't like green, then you are anti green. And you're like, wait a second, I didn't say that I don't like green. I just said that I like blue more than green. Well, then you're anti green? Like, what are you doing with your life? And you're like, no, hold please. I'm just saying that I like blue better. You know, like, can I not have an opinion? But it's kind of come down to that nowadays where you can't really have an opinion. It's like you're either a part of the group or you're one of the others. It's almost like there's this massive clique. If you went to high school or even middle school around other people, you know what I'm talking about. And unfortunately, it happens in workplaces now too. There are like these cliques. There are the in people, the cool people, and then there's the others. I have a lot of experience with this because I was always one of the others. Like every place that I've ever been, I've been one of the others, one of the people who don't fit in, like one of the weird people. Um, a company that I used to work for, they had this lunch club, right? Everybody would all get together and go to lunch every single day. There's like 25 people in the office, and there were probably 15 people that were in this lunch club. And it was kind of an informal, like an informal type of thing, but it was a total clique. If you weren't a part of the lunch club, then people are like, well, what's wrong with you? and and I'm like, listen, I'm not anti-lunch just because I don't go to lunch with everybody. Okay, like I like lunch, I love lunch. I go to lunch at a different time because one, I don't like being around people, and two, if I go to lunch at 11 and the rest of you go to lunch at 1, then I basically get my whole lunch period without you people, and then your whole lunch period without you people, which is 2 hours of the day, which is way better than just the one. And plus, if I went to lunch with you, I wouldn't get a lunch by myself. I would have to make small talk with like 15 people. And why would I do that? That feels like torture, you know? And nowadays, nobody even gives you the chance to have that realization, right? You're either a part of the lunch club or you're anti-lunch. And I'm like, how about no? I'm not anti anything. Okay. I'm just pro my own choices. I'm pro me. I'm not anti me. I'm pro me. And you should be more pro you too. Stop letting other people dictate what you do and what you say and what you think and what you believe. That's stupid. It's so stupid. Where are you going to be 10 years from now when you're letting all of these people make your decisions for you? Right? And why do you feel this need to label people as one of the others? Why? You can sit here and make excuses and say, well, it's about health or it's about life and death or whatever rationale that you want to put on your beliefs. Not even on your beliefs, but just on your behaviors. Because a lot of people go along because they don't want to cause a fight, right? They go along because they don't want to be labeled as one of the others. They go along because it seems like too much work to be opposed. They go along because they just don't want to cause an issue, right? Don't rock the boat. Just let it go. How about no? How about you rock the boat? How about you cause an issue? How about you stand up for what you believe in rather than just going along? So I have another story that goes with this, kind of a story. um, I have a confession. I have an addiction to the news. Unfortunately, it's one of my vices that I'm dealing with right now. But I was reading this story just last week about Anne Frank, who, if you don't know who she is, she was a victim, I guess you would say, of the Holocaust. Her and her family hid from the Nazis for 2 years in a secret compartment in their house. And somebody informed the the Nazi police, I guess you would say, that they were living there. And so the Nazis came to get them and put them in concentration camps. And I believe there were like 6 or 8 people who were living there, and only one of them survived the concentration camps. And so the story in the news was that they think that they know who ratted them out, basically. So that's why I was reading the story. And I've always been really fascinated with the Holocaust because it was just such a horrible, awful thing. And the more that I read about it, the more that I'm interested in it because I see so many parallels from what happened back then to what's happening now, to what's happening in the United States, to what's happening in China, what's happening in a lot of places, places like Russia and Venezuela and North Korea. I mean, you see it in so many places. And I really wanted to learn as much as I could about it because I know that if you don't learn from the past, then you're doomed to repeat it. I've spoken on this podcast many times about how we like habits, right? We do the same thing that we've always done. And unfortunately, a lot of that comes back to big things in our society too. We do things that we've always done. We believe things that we've always believed, whether those are good things or bad things. But I think about the Holocaust in terms of why were some people labeled as the others? Are they not all human beings? Were they not all human beings? Are we not today all human beings? Do we not all deserve to be loved? Do we not all deserve to be accepted? Isn't that what we're here for? Do you accept people who have cancer? Do you accept people who have tuberculosis? Do you accept people who have emphysema or COPD? Of course you do. So why is that different than people who have a virus? Do you accept them if they have a different skin color than you do, or if they're from a different part of the world than you are, if they speak differently than you do? Why would you not? Why does that make them one of the others? That acceptance is one of the most important things in the world. Isn't that what we're all here for? I mean, that's what I'm here for. I'm not interested in labeling people as others. And I know that a lot of people think that I am, right? Because is INFJ not a label? To me, it's not a label. I don't use INFJ as a way to distinguish myself from other people, right? It's not something that I'm proud of or that I boast about. It's not something that I make sure that everybody else knows. It's not a way for me to say I'm better than you are. It's not a way for me to say, I'm super special and you're just nothing. I'm not interested in that. I don't want to label people as the others. Understanding my personality type, for me, it's a way for me to understand myself. And it's also a way for me to understand other people. I can't understand why people act the way that they do by myself. Before I knew about personality types, it made no sense to me whatsoever. But once I learned that some people are introverted and some people are extroverted, and there are different levels of it, then things started to make sense. Once I learned that some people make decisions through thinking about things and other people make decisions through how they feel, then things really started to make sense. I've been learning about other ways to categorize people too, like other personality tests. I've been learning about the Big Five, and I know that a lot of people criticize it. At the same time, a lot of people criticize the Myers-Briggs type indicator. So to me, I don't worry about what other people think. I worry about what I think and what I can learn from learning how to categorize people. So in learning about the Big Five, they talk about openness is one of the big things, right? Being open to new ideas, being creative. And that is opposed to wanting to do the same thing that you've always done. right? And I think that you can learn a lot from that. You can learn you can learn why people like certain things, like why people are drawn to being progressive Democrats, whereas other people are drawn to being strict conservative Republicans. A lot of it has to do with how open to new ideas you are, how open to change you are, or how much you want to stay the same, how much you want things to always be the same. So, do creative people who like change, are they better or worse than people who like tradition and doing the same thing all the time? I don't think they're better or worse. I think they're different. And I think it helps to understand people, which is a good thing. But the whole label of better or worse or anti or pro is, I think it's counterproductive to what we're trying to do here, which is really just understand. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do here. That's what my whole goal for everything that I do is just a better understanding, because I want to live a better life. I want to improve my life. I want to not have arguments with people. I want to know how to be happier. I want to know how to be happier with my friends. I want to know why my friends leave me and how to keep friends longer. I want to know, how to find a job that I like rather than being stuck in a job that I hate. I don't want to feel trapped. I don't want to feel miserable. I want to be happy. So when you're thinking about your career and your whole life, really, you have to think about what is beyond peer pressure, right? What's beyond what society looks like right now? Because that peer pressure, it's going to change. It's changed so much. On another another tangent here, I'm kind of disgusted with TV shows and movies nowadays, like the new ones, because they're such a mess, and a lot of them are nearly impossible for me to watch. So I've been watching a lot of old movies and old TV shows, and I've actually been watching The Golden Girls. It was on TV from 1985 to 1992, and I don't believe I ever watched it live, but I have watched reruns multiple times. There's so many things. It's been a long time since I've watched the series, first of all, but there's so many things that they talk about in the show. You know how traditional sitcoms go. They present a problem in the first 15 minutes and it seems like the end of the world, and the next, it's probably 15 to 20 minutes. I think they're like 22 minutes, but by the end of the episode, everything is right in the world and they've solved all their problems. And a lot of times, a lot of the problems that they talk about are things that people would be horrified by now, right? Like there was an episode where one of the main characters, her name is Blanche, her brother is gay. And so in one of the episodes, he came out to her and told her that he was gay, and she like freaked out, like, no, that's not okay. But then she decided that she was okay with it, right? So then on the next season, he brought his fiance, I guess it ended up being his boyfriend, to meet her, and she was confused, first of all. Like she thought it was just a friend, and then she realized, like, oh, that's like your boyfriend. And he was like, yeah. And again, she had a problem, like she wasn't okay with it. And then he was like, well, we're actually getting married and we want you to come to our wedding. And she was like, what? You can't get married. Like, what are you talking about? And then as the episode continues, it may have even been 2 episodes because it was kind of long, but they went to an awards show for one of the other characters, and so Blanche and her brother and her brother's boyfriend were all there. And her brother was talking to somebody and was trying to introduce his boyfriend to this other person. And before he could say, like, hey, this is my boyfriend, Blanche like realized what was going to happen, and she like jumps up and she's like, fire, fire, fire. And everybody like freaks out that, oh, there's a fire. And then she finally stopped screaming and everybody's like, wow, okay. She's like, oops, actually there was no fire, never mind, I'm sorry, false alarm. And so then they all sit down and her brother is like, why did you do that? Like, I know that you just did that so that I didn't have to say that this guy was my boyfriend. And it was just like this whole thing of like it wasn't okay, but then of course by the end of the episode everything was okay and it was totally fine. But just the whole storyline, I was thinking about it while I'm watching it, and I thought, I don't think people would write that storyline today. Like even the idea that it wasn't okay, would be like this massive issue today. And something that just happened, I guess it has been, what, 36 years? Because I was born in 1985, right? So it's been 36 years since it started, and how much society has changed now. Now you almost get canceled just for saying that a boy is a boy and a girl is a girl, you know? So if you look at the peer pressure in your career, in society, there's so much that's going to change. Even in just a short amount of time, it will change. I think about the things that have changed in my lifetime. And I always, every time I'm going back to these big things, I think about the really big things, right? So for me, I think about Y2K. I was like 13, had just turned 14 in December of 1999. If you're as old as I am, you remember Y2K or older. Y2K was like this massive thing. Like, for some reason, when they had created computers, instead of putting four numbers as years, they used two numbers because it was a big deal. Like, we wouldn't say 1999, we would just say 99. It was a big deal. Everybody knew what that meant. That, as far as my understanding goes, that was what the issue was. There may have been a bigger issue or something that I didn't know about, but when I was 13, that's what I heard was the issue. And looking back now, it's like, that seems so stupid, right? But in the moment, in that time, it felt like the end of the world. In fact, there were people who were planning for a global power outage, right? They were thinking we weren't going to have electricity. They were thinking that banks were going to shut down and airplanes weren't going to be able to fly, and you weren't going to be able to get gas because there were computers that pulled the gas out of the in the gas station. Like, there were computers that controlled everything, and they were worried that all the computers were going to crash. And so you wouldn't be able to get food. You wouldn't be able to even go into the grocery store because the doors in the grocery store wouldn't unlock because of the computer system that had crashed. It was just like, one thing after another. And so many people believed that basically the whole world was going to end. One of my parents' friends, people that we went to church with, we lived in Kansas at the time. They had bought an off-the-grid house in Colorado. And back then, an off-the-grid house was not like a common thing. It was like this really weird thing. And there wasn't, like, you couldn't get solar panels as easily as you can get them now. They weren't as cheap as they are now. They weren't like easy to install. You had to really know what you were doing. And I don't even think they bought solar panels. Honestly, they just bought like this little cabin that was off the grid with no running water and no electricity. And the funniest part of the whole thing is they had like 8 or 9 kids, right? And some of them were just babies. And I remember like my mom and dad talking about it, like, these people are seriously think that they're gonna go live off grid. Like, really? It seemed like the end of the world, so much so that, I mean, it wasn't just them. They weren't alone. Thousands of people, probably tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, were legitimately panicking. They really thought it was the end of the world. That was their belief system. I remember my parents were pretty nonchalant about it, right? They were like, well, I don't think it's going to happen, but if it does, whatever, we'll figure it out. And I remember in my mindset, being 13, 14 years old, listening to people talk about how this was the end of the world, I was really scared and anxious. And for some reason, I was more scared that my parents were like nonchalant. I'm thinking, this is everything, like, we're all gonna die. And I remember like almost yelling at them one time, which was so uncommon for me, right? I was the good little girl who did everything right. I was never one to yell at my parents. But there was one time I was just like so scared. I was like yelling at them, like, why are you not concerned about this? This is the end of the world. Like, we're all gonna die. And they're like, dude, would you just chill out? Like, seriously, it's not a big deal. We're not gonna die. And I'm like, I don't think so. And they're like, well, what does it really matter if you do die? You don't have anything to worry about anymore. So let's just like wait until we get to that point and see what happens. And I'm like, don't you want to have a plan? And they're like, well, do you want to go live off grid? And I'm like, well, not really. And they're like, well, if the electricity goes out, we'll all be off grids. Like, what does it matter whether we go live in the mountains or we live here? It doesn't really matter. Like, what are you gonna do? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I guess when you put it that way, you just do what you gotta do. I don't know. I don't know what to do. And they're like, well, then don't worry about it. And I'm like, well, that just doesn't seem like the right thing to do. But that was what happened, and eventually I quit worrying about it because Y2K happened. I think I was sitting up. I don't usually wait. Like, I don't usually even worry about the new year. If my favorite band is on, like Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve, then I'll watch it. But if not, I usually just do something else or go to sleep. But I think I remember sitting up and like watching the ball drop from Times Square, on that new year. And it was like, somebody go check the light switch. Like, well, the TV didn't shut off. So I think we're going to be okay. And then we all go to bed, and the next morning it's like, no, the lights still work. The TV still works. I think we're going to be okay. I think everybody's fine. But in the moment, you don't think that life is going to continue. You think this is the end of the world. I remember feeling the same way on 9/11, and every single day after that for a long time. Like, this is literally the end of the world. I don't know how we can get past this. I remember feeling that way during the recession in 2008. We were watching major banks file for bankruptcy, and you're watching hundreds of people walk out of companies, and everybody that has lost their job, and they're all going to lose their house, and they have no idea what to do. You feel like it's the end of the world, and you don't know how to look past it. I know, sure, for certain, there have been many times where I felt that way in the last couple of years. I've had that mentality. It was one of those excuses that I used of like, well, I really need to lose weight, but I don't know if like today is the end of the world or tomorrow, so maybe I'll just eat some more cookies. I mean, at least that's going to help me feel better today, at least for a little while, until the cookies are gone, and then I'll feel bad about it again. But I know that there's a lot of people who felt that way. It's easy to get stuck in that mentality, right? It's easy to get stuck in what's happening right now. It's easy to get stuck in placing labels on other people because that's what society wants. But when you look back, not only at your life, but also at different times in history, there were times when it was legal and it was popular to place labels on Jews because they were Jewish. There were times when it was legal and it was popular to place labels on people of color because they were people of color. But that doesn't make it right, and it doesn't make it okay. And if it wasn't right and okay back then why is it right and okay now? It's not. I don't believe that it is at all. And when you're looking at that from your career perspective, from your life perspective, you have to think, like we were talking about earlier, there's a lot that's going to happen that you don't know about yet, right? Everything has a season. And the things that you're struggling with right now, they may seem like the end of the world. It may seem like you're not going to make it through these, but you've made it through so many other things, right? If you're as old as I am, you made it through Y2K. You made it through 9/11. You made it through the recession. We're almost through COVID. There is hope. everything has a season, and you're going to make it through whatever it is that you're struggling with right now. Whatever peer pressure that you're struggling with, whatever disaster that you're struggling with, you're going to make it through. So I really encourage you not to think about what society wants or what your friends want, what your family wants. And believe me, I understand how extremely difficult that is. It's one thing to sit here and say it. It's one thing to say, you should accept people, you shouldn't judge people. And it's a whole nother thing to sit down and say, you know what, I'm actually going to act this out. It's a whole nother thing. But it's worth it. What's that saying? If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. I think that's true. I think it's true now more than ever. It's kind of a heavy and difficult conversation to get into when you're talking about career. And I'm sure if you've made it this far in the podcast that you were not expecting all of that. That's okay. I'm glad that you're still here. I really, really, really encourage you to think about those things though, because it's easy to get caught up in all of those things and not be able to see past them. But I genuinely believe that there is something past all of those things. Like I said, everything has a season. And just like bell-bottom pants, and just like turtleneck shirts, and I'm trying to even think, like khaki pants and midriffs and all these things that you see nowadays, just like fashion, sometimes things are fashionable and then they fall out of fashion and they come back into fashion and then they fall out and they come back and they fall out and they come back. And it happens with belief systems, it happens with mentality, it happens with everything, not just fashion. So let's get back to a career. You're here because you hate your career, or you don't even know where to start with a career. You want something different. So think about this. If money wasn't an issue, what would you do? And repeat that sentence with a lot of different things, right? If time wasn't an issue, what would you do? If your parents weren't an issue, if your husband wasn't an issue, if your wife wasn't an issue, if your kids weren't an issue, if responsibility wasn't an issue, if where you live in the world wasn't an issue, what would you do? What do you want to do? What makes you happy? And I know, believe me, I know these questions are like big questions. You may not find the answer in those questions, but it's important to think about what you like. Maybe sit down and make a list of the job that you do now, or if you're in school, the courses in school that you like. What part do you like? What part do you hate? What part are you like, oh my God, I never want to do this thing again, ever? And also add to that list, what do you want to do if you weren't scared to do it? When I thought about starting a YouTube channel, I was like, I think this is a great idea. But then I was like, oh my God, I don't want to be on camera. That would be so awful. But then once I learned how to do it, it really wasn't that difficult. And then I started watching other people's YouTube channels, and I realized there's so many really, really, really good YouTube channels who have millions of subscribers, and they are never on camera. The people who make the videos are never on camera. Some of them, like one of the ones that is one of my favorites, I think it's called Bright Sun Films or something like that. Anyway, they talk about like businesses that are bankrupt and like businesses that are abandoned. And so they tell this story of a business, like one of them was about Pan Am. Like, how did Pan Am Airlines get started? And so they talk about using pictures and videos from other people. And of course, they identify the source of where the pictures and videos came from. And they tell the whole story of the airline and then why they went bankrupt. And I love those videos, and I was watching them thinking, this person is never on camera. I don't even know what they look like. And then I saw them one time because they were on camera in a different thing. And I was like, wow, I never would have thought that that voice would go with that person. Right? But not only are they don't have to be on camera, They're using pictures and videos that don't belong to them, but they're using them appropriately, like with the right sources and everything. But they had to do the work of all the research of the stories that they're telling and put the video together, but they didn't have to go take the pictures and the videos. So, I mean, even if you don't want to be on camera, even if you don't want to talk on camera, there are ways to make videos. Like one of my favorite channels is Evan Carmichael. He's on video, right? But he has most of his videos are of other people talking. So he's like, hey, Tony Robbins is really inspirational. Here are the top 10 things that Tony Robbins has ever said. So the majority of the video is Tony Robbins talking. It's not Evan Carmichael talking. And he has like over 3 million followers. And he makes millions of dollars off of YouTube every single day. So I would encourage you to think about that too. A lot of times we get stuck in this mentality of, if I want to do this one thing, then it has to be this way. But there are other ways to do the things that you want to do. It doesn't always have to be just one way, right? So let's recap. Think about, what do you want to do? What makes you happy? Then also think about it from a third person perspective. Especially as INFJs, it's difficult for us to think about ourselves, right? But if you think about it in a different way, like, what does the world need? Then you take all the pressure off of yourself, and I bet you can answer the question a lot easier, right? Because if you asked me, what do you want to do? I would be like, I don't know. That's like a really difficult question. You're just putting so much pressure on me. But if you ask me, what does the world need? I would be like, you know what? The world needs a lot more understanding. That's what the world needs. And that's partly how I came up with understanding. Another question is, what do other people need? What do the people around me need? How can I help them? What can I do for them that would make their life better? And then another question that I think is really important too, what do you spend your time doing when you get to choose? There's nobody else dictating to you, when you have no responsibility, when you have no deadlines, when you're on vacation and you're by yourself, what would you do? What would you do? I've been thinking about careers a lot because it's been a big thing in my life. And even when I think that I know what I want, sometimes I question it. Sometimes something else comes up and I start questioning it, or I get in a bad mood that lasts for weeks and I start questioning it again. And I've come down to this. The problem isn't that you don't know what you want, because you do know. You know what you want. You know exactly what you want to do. The problem is that you don't have enough courage to stand up and say, this is what I want. You don't have enough self-love. You don't have enough self-confidence. You don't have enough belief in yourself to actually believe for yourself that you can do this thing that you want to do. You don't believe it yourself, and so therefore you can't convince anybody else. The problem is that you don't believe, and you have to change that. You have to learn how to believe in yourself more in order to commit to your dreams and actually follow through on them. So how do you believe in yourself more? That's a big question. It's a big question for me. It's something that I think about a lot because it's one of those things that I struggle with too. I like to, when I get stuck in one of those, why me? Who am I to do this? This isn't going to work. I can't do this. Like this spiraling downward mindset. I like to stop and think about all the things that I've done in the past that felt impossible. There's so many things, I've talked about moving across the country. I went to England all by myself when I was pretty young. It was only like the third time that I had been on a plane, and to go by myself for a 15-hour plane ride was a huge thing for me. Moving, halfway across the country a few times. So many things that felt just paralyzingly impossible at the time. But I accomplished those things. Little by little, I got them done. So what have you done in the past? What are some of the things that you thought were impossible that you made happen? Even if it's just finishing school, finishing high school, even. There are a lot of kids over the past 2 years who haven't, been in the classroom because of COVID. They can't read. Something as simple as, reading a book, they can't read. Or they don't read at their grade level. They're not able to do math the same that, people years in the past have done at the same grade level because they haven't gotten the instruction that they needed. They haven't had the same amount of focus and attention put on them because they've been at home rather than in school. So, I mean, even if it's little things that you've done, maybe finishing high school for you wasn't a little thing. Maybe it was a big thing. Maybe it was a struggle. Finishing college for me was a struggle. All of those things, they're important things. Things that felt like they probably felt like they were impossible at the time. And the next thing is to challenge yourself to do something new. It doesn't have to be big. In fact, even if it's small, it's probably better. Because if you have something small, then you're more likely to accomplish it. And it's easier to see the gains and the results. It's easy for me to say, okay, I want to lose 100 pounds, but I can't lose 100 pounds tomorrow. I'm not going to see the results of that, right? But I might be able to lose 1 pound or 2 pounds like this week. That's reasonable. But even better would be to say, I'm going to buy one of those Fitbit things and walk 10,000 steps a day. And that's my goal. And I'm going to feel like I'm accomplished if I met that goal, regardless of whether I lose the weight or not. Because that goal is going to make me feel better. It's going to help me sleep better. I'm going to feel accomplished. I'm going to feel better about myself all the way around. Right? Even just something as simple as drinking more water or going to bed at the same time. All of these little things will make your life better on a day-to-day basis. And then you think about what's one thing that you want to do, right? You leave out money and responsibility and all of this nonsense, all of the background noise. If you leave all of that out, what's one thing that you want to do, even if it's terrifying, even if it feels impossible? Do you want to start a YouTube channel? I mean, I've done it. So as an introvert, you can definitely do it. And you can probably do it 10 times better than I did it. I'm positive that you can. Do you want to start a podcast? I've done it. So it's totally possible for an INFJ to do that. It's totally possible if you're terrified about being on video, you're terrified about being on audio, and you don't want to listen to it to edit it. You don't even have to edit it if you don't want to. You could just throw it out there and let it be. I've done that sometimes. Believe me, it works. And it's not really that embarrassing. I mean, it feels like the end of the world in the moment. But then once you get past that, it's like, you know what? It's really not that bad. It's okay. But that's the change, right? Little by little, you start to change what you believe because you have evidence. You look for evidence of what you believe, right? So if you believe that things are impossible, that you're never going to do them, then they are impossible and you're never going to do them. But if you start looking for how things could be possible, then you'll see evidence of how they could be possible. If you start looking at all the things that you've done in the past, all the things that you've made it through, then you're going to be like, damn, I'm pretty awesome. I've made it through a lot of stuff. So if I made it through all of that, then I can make it through this, right? If you start looking at people who are introverts who made it on YouTube or in podcasting or who started a business or who are the thing that you want to be, you'll find evidence of it. You want to talk about introverts, you can talk about Bill Gates is like this nerdy introverted dude who is now one of the richest people in the world. I mean, there's a strong case to be made for introverts doing anything that they want to do. And you get to pick what you believe. It's a lot of responsibility, but it's also a lot of power. You get to say, okay, I believe that I'm worthless and nothing, and that I can't do anything. That's probably already what you believe. If you're anything like me, that's like your default position. This is what I believe. But you can also say, you know what? That's really kind of a bummer. I don't want to believe that anymore. And even though like it's challenging to every single day stop yourself in your tracks and say, hold please. I'm actually pretty awesome. I've made it through a lot of things. I've done a lot of things. I can do hard things, you know? I made it through life, which is impossibly awful and terrible and really hard. I've made it 36 years and counting. I can make it through this too. When it comes to your career, you just have to think about, what do you want? What do you really want to do? Not what you believe that you can do, not what you believe is possible right now. What do you really want to do beyond that belief? If your friend was talking to you and they were like, you know what, I want to change my career, but I don't know. And maybe they would say, hey, I want to be a writer, or hey, I want to be an artist, or hey, I want to be a musician. And think about yourself telling somebody that. Think about yourself in the third person, as if it was your friend who's telling you, I really want to write music. What would you say to them? If one of your friends said to you, I really want to write music, I think I could be I think I could be the next Lady Gaga. Would you sit there and go, oh my God, that is so stupid? Like, no, don't do that. Or would you be like, that is so cool? Like, you can totally do that. All you have to do is learn how to write music. And then maybe you already know how to write music. Maybe you know how to play the piano or the guitar. All you have to do is put something together. It's so easy. Like, let me help. How can I help you? If one of my friends came to me and said that I would be the second person going, oh my God, that's so awesome. How can I help you? Literally, one of my friends not too long ago was texting me and she's like, I kind of want to start a podcast. And I sort of had this idea. And I was like, oh my God, I love that. I already have a podcast and I know how to do all the things and I want to do that too. And she's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, this could be so cool. Like, hey, and like within an hour, I'm like, here's what the name could be, and here's what the logo could be, and like this would be so cool. Like, when do you want to start recording? And she's like, oh my God, I just literally had this idea and I wasn't really even sold on it. And I can't believe that you're so excited about it. I'm like, okay, that was sort of overkill. So you keep thinking about your idea and you let me know when you're ready to go, because I'm totally ready to go. And so, I mean, you have to think about yourself in that other position and be like, okay, the me right now, and maybe you even give her a different name because I've been playing with this idea, right? The decisions that you're making right now will affect you in the future. There is this future you that you're either helping or hurting, right? I never thought about it this way, but I think it makes so much sense to think about it this way. And whether, you give the future you a different name, right? And you think of her as a totally different person. So maybe my future you, maybe her name is called Penny. And, I think about what do I want Penny to look like? Well, I want Penny to be healthy and I want her to be a full-time writer. And I want her to be helping people all the time. And I want her to be happy. And I want her to live in a house by the beach. So I write down all of these things and I'm like, okay, so the decisions that I make today, I'm either helping Penny or I'm hurting Penny. And, whether you like that name or not, maybe you want to go with Sarah 2.0 or however you want to do it. It's easier for me to think about her as a different person, right? Because when I think about her as me, I'm like, ugh, me, I don't, it's not that important. But when I think about somebody else, I'm like, no, I really want to help that other person. So I think about Penny as a whole other person and I'm like, okay, whether or not I go to sleep tonight at the same time, go to sleep at 10 o'clock and wake up at 7 o'clock, go to sleep at 10 o'clock, wake up at 7 o'clock. Whether I do that every single day for the next year, if I do, it's going to help Penny. If I don't, it's going to hurt Penny. You know what? I'm going to do it because I want to help this person. Whether I actually go outside today and get all the vitamin D from the sun, that's going to help her. If I don't do it, it's going to hurt her. If I choose healthy over, comfort and convenience, healthy is going to help her. Anything else is not going to help her. when you start thinking about it that way, it's like, wow, that puts a lot of stuff in perspective. I've always been banking on the future, right? But I've never really made the that kind of connection with what I'm doing today is either going to help me in the future or hurt me in the future. I've always just thought about tomorrow. Like, I want to make a change, but I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next week. You know what? The first of the month is a good round number. I'll do it next month. You know what? It's like October, November. Maybe I'll just wait until the new year. And then, here we are, the almost getting to the end of January, and you're like, man, I had big dreams for my New Year's resolutions, and 3 weeks into the new year, I've forgotten what they are. I don't even know what they are. Maybe next year. Maybe next year. I have a whole list of New Year's resolutions, and I'm not waiting until next year to do them. I know that some of them have not turned out the way that I thought. While I'm making progress on others, I'm gonna stick with them. I'm gonna keep going and keep them in the front of my mind and keep thinking about the future me that is dependent on me making good decisions now, me making healthy decisions, me making difficult decisions, me making decisions every single day that are going to dictate what happens in the future. It all comes down to what you believe. It all comes down to what you choose. You get to choose. It feels like this impossible responsibility, but it's also this amazing power. You get to decide. How awesome is that? All you have to do is decide what you want and say, you know what? I'm not going to accept anything else. I'm not going to say I'm not worthy of that. I'm not going to say I can't do that. I'm going to say I'm doing that. Let's figure out how to get there. And if one of your problems is, you know what? I don't have enough self-love. Welcome to the club. I have that problem too. But I'm not going to let that dictate the rest of my life. I'm going to say, okay, how do I figure out how to have more self-love? That's obviously standing in my way. So let's figure out how to solve that problem and then move on to the next one. Obviously, there's a way to get around it because people have solved it, to get through it, around it, over it, whatever you want to say. People have solved it. Maybe there's just a way to live with it. Maybe that's what we have to do. That works. It just all comes down to what you believe. I put together a free guide that has some of the questions that we talked about and some of the things that we talked about. You can download it through the link that's in the show notes. And I really hope that it helps you because I want you to be in a career that you love. I want you to do something every day that helps other people and that you're passionate about and that you just can't wait to do. Like, you can't wait to get up in the morning and go to your job or do the work that you do, because it's really amazing to be in that kind of position. And I think that we should all be doing work that we love. I think the world would be a better place because when you're doing work that you love, it affects so much. You're happier, you're healthier, you're more motivated, you have more belief. If you believe in yourself, you can believe in other people. And if you doing something, it can motivate other people, right? Me starting a podcast is evidence that you can start a podcast. Me starting a blog is evidence that you can be a writer. Me having videos on YouTube is evidence that you can start a YouTube channel. You can do anything that you want to do. I firmly believe that. It really just depends on what you believe. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate every single one of you. Please make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a review wherever you listen to the podcast. It helps other people to be able to find us. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you again next week. Hi there. I just wanted to take a minute to say thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. Please consider subscribing to my channel. I'm working very hard to produce content that will help you, and I really appreciate your support. Also, if you want some more inspiration, check out this video right here.